tonight, initially the idea of this came from the seminar we had in July with the launch of the Newcastle Institute, where those of you who were there will remember that we had a bit of brainstorming about topics. And someone talked about the weird psychology of our city. We should investigate that. And from that we came up with the idea of putting Newcastle on the couch. That Newcastle goes to the psychologist or the psychiatrist or even a social worker, or I suppose some sort of a counsellor, but not the sort of counsellors with a C, but the counsellors with an S. And we have elected 3 counsellors, being Tanya Davis, who's a consulting and forensic psychologist, Associate Professor Chris Wilcox, who's a psychiatrist at Newcastle Uni and had a New England Health, and Trevor Hazel, who is by profession a social worker, but most of his work is as the director of Newcastle Institute of Mental Health, and he's been busy this week, and particularly today, celebrating their 20th anniversary. So congratulations, Trevor, to you and all your staff. And of course, we also have our patient. And our patient over here is played by one of our committee, Roger Pryor, and as Newey, I think he is, he's decided to seek some assistance with some problems that he's been having. So I'll hand over to Newey. Oh, sorry, more Roger's getting set up. I should point out too, this is Chris Leck, who has come along and is offered to film this, and not only can he operate a camera, but he tells us that he can work out how to actually put it on the web as a webcast. Or you can do some of the steps. So it's an experiment, and hopefully we'll be able to download film of the event, and if you can't come along, you'll be able to see it afterwards. So I'll hand over to Neil.
Thank you, Ross. I'm just hoping we can get that feedback problem sorted out. It's typical, isn't it, when you try to personify a city or a town, things go awfully wrong sometimes. I mean, I had a lot of trouble trying to think what to even wear. You know, some people suggested that I should probably put a Newcastle Knights jumper on or something like that, and other people talked about wearing some high-vis gear or whatever. But I thought, you know, Newcastle and my view of who I am as Newcastle has probably changed fairly significantly. So I went and put a suit on and thought, we'll take it right up market. And I thought, no, that's getting way, way beyond where we really should be as a city and how we should be personifying ourselves, or how I should be presenting myself. So I'm hoping that the smart casual look sort of sits fairly comfortably. The casual bit's probably right, I'm not sure about the smart, but we'll investigate that as we go through. I'm going to see whether the feedback stops on this. Thank you much for agreeing to see me at short notice. I was given some advice to come and... because I just haven't been feeling myself lately. Just by way of background, because I know that you'll probably need to know some of those sorts of bits of information. I have this sense lately that while it's been very clear beforehand who I am, that in the last little while I've been really trying to struggle to see a sense of who and what I have been. You know, like the relationship I have with my family. I mean, I'm one of the family of cities here in Australia, and I'm actually the second oldest out of that family, but nobody ever seems to care or take any notice. And people are really sort of dismissive of that fact. No one seems to take account of the fact that even in terms of sheer population within my heart area here, that I'm certainly the second largest city in New South Wales, and yet once again people don't seem to care. I feel as though throughout the course of my life I've worked really, really hard. Right in the 20th century, for example, as the absolute heart of manufacturing, there wouldn't have been many cities in New South Wales certainly that didn't have a bridge or something around the place that actually had steel that was made by me. When men went to fight in the war, you know, so much of the munitions and things were provided by me, and yet all I seem to get is criticism and snide comments from people all around the place who say, you know, you're dirty, you're smelly, you aren't even very smart, and in fact it's a good thing the F3 goes straight past because we don't even have to suffer the indignity of going and having a look at you. You know, I have these sorts of dilemmas all of the time, and I was really hoping that you might be able to help me think about some ways that I can actually approach that and do something about it. So I don't know whether that's enough information to get started, but I was hoping that you'd probably lead me through some questions or whatever if you need more information about background and things. And perhaps if I sit over there and we'll try that mic again and see whether it's going to work, although I've now taken it off, so we won't do that at all. I'll just stand here. So,
well, first of all, I think you've come here because you're worried about how you're seen by others. Is that?
That's part of it, but I guess the other thing is that I can't actually seem to relax and get a sense of being comfortable with who I am. So it's not just how others see me, because I mean, you know, I've been around, I've been a city now for a fair while, and you know, I've sort of become comfortable in the past with how others see me. And I know that certainly it rankles sometimes when people do say nasty things, but I guess it's how do I actually work from here on in to work out who I want to be, and how do I actually take ownership of how they might see me, rather than necessarily the stuff I can't do anything about, probably, which is what they do.
So you're looking for ideas from us about how you can move forward?
I think so. Where do I go from here? You know, I've made a choice about appearance and how I might present myself and that sort of thing. But so how do I go forward from here? What can I do in terms of?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've been elected amongst us to ask you some questions that might help us if we gather some more information that might help us to understand the situation you're in. Okay, you're the second oldest in the family of cities of Australia.
That's right.
What are some of the significant childhood or adolescent events that have really mattered to you and helped to create the person that you are?
Oh, well, right from the start, elder brother Sid, he always wanted all the glory. Like even when I was born, I got all the hand-me-downs. I got the very worst convicts sent here. Sent them to me to look after, and I had to do all the really hard work. I even had to build my own wharves and things like that right back in the early days. And nothing was ever easy. I always sort of felt as though, okay, Sid gets all the glory, and you're there to support that, but there's really no feedback. There's nothing other than just getting the very worst and the hand-me-downs. And I've had that all over. Buses, trains, everything is just handed down. And even now, we've sort of got to wait for Sid to decide something before any of us can do anything. And that really gets frustrating after a while.
And do you feel that you were given, what level of education do you think you've been able to reach at this point? During your as you were growing up.
Oh, well, it's been a bit of a struggle. I mean, in the early days, there wasn't much available. Although I do have the longest continually operating school in Australia, right here, and pretty proud of that. But even the university, we had to be part of one of Sid's universities for about 15 years or something until we got some autonomy. But I think, even though it's been a bit of a struggle for me personally, I now think that I've got the choices available that are open pretty much anywhere else, I think, to have access to education. So I don't see education so much as a problem.
Well, I think later on we might come back and ask you how you actually got to have such good education, given the struggles that you say you've been through. You've actually had some successes, so it would be good for us to learn how you did that.
Okay, sure.
I'd like to know a bit about the family, like the nurturing of you as a child from outside, perhaps Mother England, who perhaps is no longer with us.
Uncle Sam, who's obviously helped bring you up.
Well, I suppose I always felt that it was sort of like being the second one, that it was always a bit of a pat on the head and, look, that's terrific. And we'll recognise when we really need to. I mean, they said, all right, you can have a Lord Mayor because of all the good stuff that you did to support our war effort and all of those bits and pieces. So there's been that grudging recognition, but I've never had the sense that the Queen, for example, ever came to visit me first. It was always part of just a whistle stop, perhaps, on a grand tour. There's never ever been the sense that, even though we have some magnificent buildings and things, that we're never really on the A list, so far as that sort of recognition goes. So I guess there's always a little bit of a sense of disappointment.
Yeah, I can hear that disappointment and resentment. Really, resentment there. Is that still colour how you see the situation now?
Well, that's the thing. On the one hand, there's a bit of resentment, I suppose, but on the other hand, there's also a bit of celebration. I mean, even though I get annoyed about Sid sometimes, I also don't want to be like him. He's far too big and busy and rushing everywhere. That's one of the nice things about being Newick, is that I can relax. I can always generally, apart from another night like this, get a park within 50 metres wherever I want. I don't have to struggle with peak hour traffic and gridlock and things like that. So even though I get a bit frustrated, when I talk to myself about it and say, well, count your blessings and do all that, I feel good about that side of it. But yeah, there is still some resentment. I guess it's the fact that he owns all the toys.
Yes. Okay, and you get them last. You
That's
get them
right.
after he'd finished. Okay.
Yes.
So, look, as I said before, there are obviously some strengths that you've been able to use along the way to overcome that. But in this assessment, we do need to explore some risk factors. To see whether they're there, whether they're still relevant. Can you tell us, has there been any, incidents of any kind of abuse in the family? Any type of violence that you've experienced, or history of drug and alcohol abuse?
Oh, look, I think, there have been some fairly well publicised examples of late where, I have probably been seen to suffer from some significant sorts of incidents that have occurred in the past, and that's where I've been working as hard as I can to overcome that and to see the light ahead and things. But I probably do need a few strategies to actually overcome that. I mean, right back in my early days, as I said, it was the very nastiest people got sent here. And even when we were exploring our coal mines and things over in Hamilton, it was some of the miners from the north of England who came here with a pretty recalcitrant lot who couldn't get work back home quite often, and ended up being some troublemakers and whatever. So I always had to struggle, I suppose, against some of those demons. We were nowhere else in Australia got hit by an earthquake, did they? That would only happen to me.
And there was that incident with the Japanese that really wanted to get stuck into you at one point there.
Ah, that's right. But I mean, at least we fired back, didn't we?
Yeah.
We were one of the few places that actually had the opportunity. Sydney didn't do that, did they? Although they did have to charge money.
Would you like to explore the family history so far?
The quick answer to that is no for me.
Come on up, carry the
Yeah, exactly. Look, I certainly would like to know a bit more about the history of the other children. So you've mentioned quite a bit about Sid along the way, right?
Yeah.
So where Sister Canberra, for instance, there's little Melly down the road.
Oh,
just wondering how the relationship's been.
Mel's a bit annoying because she's always doesn't care about me, even though she could fly here direct every day. She doesn't seem to in any great numbers. And seems to spend most of her time bickering with Sid. Christmases were always pretty awful. When all they would do was sort of try to play, who's got the biggest box of toys, and I'd be left having to, manufacture the barbecue and get it started and fire it up and do all those sorts of things. And so, not a particularly happy existence. And of course, all of them got a special badge. They're all called capitals. And I'm just a lowercase Sid.
And yet, I'm aware that while Sid did get the things like the big harbour and the big bridge, and all we got was a little lake down the road, that in terms of rewards, we got the gold medals just recently at the Olympics for our sailors. So I'm aware that with what we've got, you seem to have done an awful lot of good.
Oh, and I guess that comes back to my frustration. When you think about it, I've done an awful, fabulous things. Some of the musicians and performers that produced here and helped nurture have gone on to fabulous things, and yet they're not necessarily recognised as being from Newcastle. But we've got some great heritage and history in that.
Newey, you sound like you're having a really tough time at the moment, but before we go on to finding out a bit more about the problem, can you tell us a bit about the kind of work that you've done? Have you ever had a job?
Oh, job. I mean, that's really there's been nothing other than job and expectation around getting things done. You know, they started digging coal right here at the mouth of the river, and ever since then it's been job after job after job after job, you know, because ships kept running aground on the oyster bank. We had to build a pier and a breakwater and do all of that ourselves, you know. No one came to the party things. After that, we started digging the place up, and you know, no one cared about how I felt about all of that. It was if we wanted to build a train line that ran down there and across there, we went ahead and did it. And people seemed to just, you know, dig holes in the ground, let the stuff fall in, and then build that up. We have the biggest soap factory in the southern hemisphere right here in Newcastle. Right up alongside where we also built one of the biggest steel works. You know, so really it's been nothing but work the whole life pretty much. But of course that's changed now, because the sorts of work that I was comfortable doing, hence my dilemma in what to dress in, has now changed, and I'm now left thinking, well, what sort of work can I do now? Because all the stuff and the skills that I used to have may not necessarily be relevant for a future world. And so I'm struggling to think about how I can actually manage that change as well.
So it sounds like you're feeling a bit lost.
Lost, I guess the point is probably not so much lost as feeling torn a number of different ways. Because there's part of me that says, look, isn't it great that we've now got an exciting opportunity to do things differently, but there's also part of me that says, it's so sad that we no longer have a Hunter Street where we can get off at the store, walk for 2 kilometres and shop all along the way. Or that other things might be set to change, and that we no longer have a 4 o'clock peak hour when the final whistle goes over the steelworks and everybody runs to their car, and we have 15 minutes of mayhem, then it all goes away again. So I guess on the one hand, I feel as though I'm being torn a little bit, because there's part of me wants to embrace a global digital economy and is making plans for that, and there's another part of me though who wants to revive something that may well have passed into history, and then there's another part of me that really doesn't care too much and just is happy with the way it is. So I'm sort of not sure. It's probably where it is at the moment.
So I'm just wondering if, say, our conversation made something different for you, and you didn't feel that way anymore, you didn't feel confused or torn, what would it be instead?
I think probably a little more clarity of purpose, but probably feedback from the people who matter to me, you know, and who want to help me manage things as to what we agreed on going forward, rather than, you know, like for years and years, you know, I used to hang around with one sort of people, you know, and even just recently as last weekend, I've suddenly now got a whole new group of friends who want to actually tell me what to do and how to run. And some of the things that, you know, they're saying are very, very different from what I've been used to. You know, I've always been used to, you know, having to talk broadly to a whole range of people and make decisions collaboratively and things like that. And then suddenly I'm getting told that you don't have to worry about that. You just get in and get the job done. So it's a bit of a challenge.
I'd just like to take up the history again. Are there any physical health problems that we need to know about?
Well, I always have a bit of a nagging respiratory issue. And it seemed for a while as though that was going away, but lately there are some issues with, you know, very small particulate dust and things like that seem to be reviving some of those problems, so I'm a bit concerned with that. Some of my arteries are now starting to clog. We've recently heard some suggestions about, you know, sorting some of those out by making some arteries run that way and some arteries run the other way. And that probably sounds okay, but you know, there may not be a bypass or two in there. I'm not sure.
Well, I'd like to know how you feel about that is pretty important as well. I mean, that's major surgery.
Well, I guess if the outcome is that I can feel as though people are comfortable living in my skin and within that as a general area, well, that's a good outcome. But I'm a little bit worried as to whether that's the best approach. You know, there may be some other ways that people have dealt with clogged arteries elsewhere in the world, for example, that people aren't actually taking consideration from.
I can see by your cough there that the respiratory and arterial problems are affecting you right now. So, you know, do you need to have a rest, or you're okay to go on?
Oh, I'll be fine, I think.
I just want to know the musculoskeletal system. You know, how strong are you?
Oh,
How physically fit?
Oh, not as fit as I once was, and I think that's fairly typical for people who have been used to doing a lot of physical labour and then find that they've got to actually try and exercise other parts of their body and don't necessarily have the capacity to do that as we once did in other things. You know, I've always worked with my hands, and now suddenly I find that I've got to try and work with my head. And sometimes the capacity is not perhaps the same, and we don't. You know, there's a bit of self-doubt there, I guess.
Oh yes, there were some health problems associated with Mother Earth, the earthquake, and then floods. You know, that must have shaken up the system a fair bit.
Oh, very much so, and I mean, luckily we've been more lucky than say Christchurch in New Zealand, because we had the event and then it went away again. So I guess that's nice, thinking that you know it did happen, but it's still scary stuff to get that level of being shaken around, and then. You know, having a ship run aground on your major beach is a little bit of an eye-opener as well, and sort of makes you a little bit fearful of what might happen, and certainly the level of flooding and the ability of us to deal with that in the future, you know, sort of is a bit of a concern as well, whether we'll be able to be resilient enough, I guess. I suppose every time with trauma you feel like you can pick up and move on, but if it happens again, will there still be that inner core of strength to get through it? I guess that's where I'm hoping to get perhaps some help from people. You know.
But you look alive and well, so you survived those physical health problems.
Oh well, yes. You know, there are still issues, and I still seek help from time to time. You know, I've got a range of you know, things that I'm going through to deal with that on a physical side, and I've had a few bits replaced along the way. That sort of thing, but I suppose that's just a feature of ageing, really, and I've now been around since the early 1800s, so I guess it's probably reasonable that I'm starting to wear a bit thin.
I guess just in terms of having been around for that period of time, just want to look a little bit more judicially. I guess I have some interesting things like substance abuse. I'm just wondering in terms of alcohol, has that ever been a problem for you over the years?
Well, yes. I was, although even there, see, it's become more of a problem now because there's more choice. You know, there was only ever a schooner black and white stage, and now there's all these other fancy things, and that makes it a bit more difficult to choose. But certainly, you know, as a city, I think I've probably suffered from that sense of slaking a thirst, and that was okay when people used to work hard and things, but now we have a bit of a scenario where people feel as though that's the way that you get to get your jollies on a Friday night, perhaps, and so we've seen some impacts from that as well. And I'm not particularly comfortable with some of my behaviour when I do that sort of stuff.
I guess that's where I was wondering a little bit about with some of these extra choices of drinks that I'm hearing you drinking up till 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning. A little bit out of control behaviour.
Yeah, well, I guess the other issue with that is that I'm not as young as I used to be either. But having said that, I mean, there was a time where I used to go out earlier. I just can't understand lately why, you know, if I want to go out and hear some music or something, it never starts till 11 o'clock at night. And by that stage, if I've been sitting at home under the clothesline out the back with a few mates drinking a slab of beer, I probably need something else artificial to keep me awake. So I'm bouncing off walls by the time I get into town, and probably when a bouncer says to me that you can't come in, I get angry and want to kick things and things like that. And so I wonder that could be challenged a bit too.
Yeah, just wondering about it. You kind of say in recent times you tend to bounce off walls. I'm just thinking back to the Star. There seemed to be a bit of wall bouncing went on that night as well.
At the start? Oh, well, yeah. That was the end of an era, wasn't it? But even that was only the back bar of the star. The writing at the other end was probably of a different sort. In fact, today it was interesting in terms of identity. Someone asked me, why do I see myself as a male? Well, because I am, I suppose, but and I couldn't find a frock large enough. But I suppose that's an interesting point, isn't it? That there probably is a feminine side to this equation as well. And I don't know how well I explore that sometimes. And that's a bit of a dilemma as well, because there must be a very significant percentage of the population, probably around about 50%, who are actually female. And probably not actually representing their point of view particularly well just at the moment.
So I'm wondering, Newey, if you've ever had a relationship, like a good, healthy, positive relationship?
I'm just wondering what I should admit to. Do you mean friends or?
No, a partnership, a relationship that you've developed with another place that's been of mutual benefit.
I think I've been having a sordid affair for years with Lake Macquarie. There are times where, we shack up together and share the benefits of cohabitation and get things done as a partnership. But there are other times where she doesn't want to talk and says, look, I've got better shops than you, and my child stand looks flashier than your CBD and that sorts of things. So we have those little contretemps every now and then, but by and large I think that's been a pretty effective relationship over the years, and there's been a fair shared sense that as part of that partnership that people can identify with both places and have that sense of shared identity. So I guess that's been a partnership that I've had. I mean, over the years I've had dalliances with Port Stephens and Maitland and Cessnock and places like that. But they're the sort of relationships that you just fought briefly for the mutual benefit that exists. And perhaps go and visit Port Stephens in particular every now and then, just for a bit of a holiday or watch a few whales or something, and then come home again. But I guess in terms of a long-term relationship, Lake Macquarie's probably been the one that has been the most consistent all of that time.
Have you ever thought of having children, and what would they look like?
Yeah. It's a bit difficult, isn't it? Because you think through it in terms of the genetic makeup, and you think, well, okay, they were children of, say, Newcastle and Lake Macquarie. Who do we end up with? Catherine Hill Bay? Or Killingwood? It's really difficult to know, but I suppose everybody likes the sense of continuity and family, but there's also part of me that says, well, you've got to be a little bit more comfortable with who you are before you then actually want to bring a new generation along. And I guess that's the point that I feel that I'm at as a city, that I'm really not sure whether I've actually got it sorted out as to what sort of life I want going forward, and therefore how reasonable is it to expect young people to grow up without me being clear about what it is that I actually want for the future. And so...
I just have one last question about the physical health. It seems that you've filled out your clothes rather well over the last 50 years. Not you personally. But, when you think of the boundaries of Newcastle, there's not so much spare room around the edges as there was. And you've filled out quite a lot. How has that affected you?
Well, it sort of reminds me of when I was a kid growing up, and my mother, sort of believed in economy and bought me trousers that were sort of about a foot too long when I was at 12, and had them taken up so that my growth rings could be marked on the hems of the trousers by being left out. And I always felt a little bit embarrassed about that, particularly in the school playground. And I feel at the moment that we're almost at that stage now where we can see our growth rings out around Fletcher, and out to Maryland and the other sort of towards end out to White Minmire and things. And we're really not necessarily that comfortable with the fact that there are a set of growth rings that we're really not sure of how to deal with that, and is that how we want it. But that certainly seems to be the place where we're expanding our our waistbands, if you like, and accommodating the growth. And yet it seems disconnected from what I feel is my heart and core in here on the middle plane, if you like, here in central Newcastle. And I know that those new bits feel a bit disconnected from here too, and would like those of us in the middle bit to actually recognise a little bit more of what other people do.
You know, a number of times tonight you've talked about how you're seen by others. I'd like to see how you see yourself. When you look in the mirror, and whatever the mirror is for a person who is a city, what do you like about yourself?
Oh, I love where I am. I love and particularly since we shut the steelworks down, and I know that was a chore in terms of what I used to do, but you know, certainly the clean air and things has just meant that the beaches, the physical environment that we have. I love the fact that I do have old stuff, you know, even though some of it was certainly handed down, but you know, I've got some wonderful buildings, you know, right through the part of the old town, if you like, to the east of here. I've got magnificent people. I've got people who are willing to try different things, but they tend to go about it very, very quietly, and they don't tend to necessarily get the recognition that they would deserve. I love the way that I can live. I love the way that I can ride easily on a cycle around this city. I love the fact that you know, I can get a ferry and go across to Stockton and do all sorts of nice things like that. I like the fact that I've got good food available to me, and I've got great places to go and be entertained, and there's good music. And, you know, there's lots to like.
I can really see that when you talk about your strengths, the energy leaves, and you're much more optimistic and positive, which is a real contrast to what your body language is when you're talking about your problems.
Well, that's probably a fair assessment, I suppose. And that leads to a dilemma too, because once you get too excited about it and start telling people about it, other people start writing stuff in the newspaper about the Lonely Planet or something, and then suddenly we get worried that we're going to get deluged with all these people who are going to come here, and I won't be any longer able to park 50 metres from where I want to go. Because there'll be all these tourists.
You're worried there'll be less to like.
Oh, well, there's part of me. There's one part that says, hey, it's great that other people think we're pretty good. But there's certainly another part of me that says, shh, don't tell them too much because they'll all want to come here. And we like it the way it is. So that's a bit of a dilemma as well, in terms, particularly when you ask about children and young people. You know, if we're sort of trying to hide and not let on, well, do they actually have a place of opportunity to grow into, or are they going to have to do what people have always done and go away somewhere else and prove themselves and achieve some level of success and then come back here and settle down? I mean, so there's that as an issue too.
So it sounds like you said you were worried that you were going to be a bit more like Sid.
Oh, well, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, I don't like the guy. He said you can get everything first, but I don't want to be like him. Right? So, yeah, I guess particularly all of that rushing and frantic activity and things like that, and the sense that nobody knows each other. I like the fact that I can walk around here and generally bump into someone, or at least see someone who's familiar with that sort of thing. That's nice.
I was just wondering, when you were talking about your past, you were initially talking about all the things you've achieved, and this thing that I'm worried about, we're not like that anymore. And then there was kind of this excitement about, but this is what I want in. But then another set of worries. I'm just wondering what would happen if we could just kind of park the worries up. If we could just kind of enjoy who we are now and recognise where we've been, and then just kind of think about maybe where you could go. Just create a bit of space.
Yeah, I guess I've always felt, though, I've had people say to me that, you know, if you're part of, you know, working with other people to make things and everything else, that, you know, to want to do stuff that's better than other people gets a bit competitive, and you know, can actually break down that collaborative working environment. And, you know, ambition is a little bit self-centered, and you know, to be aspirational is you know, so. On the one hand, I want to look and feel good and do exciting stuff, but on the other hand, I worry that people might then think, oh, well, you're getting a bit above yourself. You know, pull your head in. You know, you're Newcastle, you're not New York or Melbourne or Sydney. you know, think about who and what you are, and don't try and be something you're not. You know, everyone likes you the way you are, so just keep being that.
If we stop listening to those people, you know, they've got their opinions and valid opinions. If we stop listening to them, we just thought about what it is that you want from here. So think about origins to this point, and where we are. You turn them off, where would you like to go?
Oh, well, I certainly want to keep all of the nice things that we have and the nice places that we've got, because they're really enjoyable.
Let's lay them in. So what are all those nice places? Because you just seem to skip past those things.
Oh, well, as I said before, I suppose the beaches, some of the lovely buildings that we've got, some of the entertainment opportunities that we've got, certainly you know, some of the access to various things to do and things like that. The fact that I can get from here to a range of other places fairly easily are certainly things I like about it. And by and large, I like the people that I live with.
So there's some lovely aspects of being in Newcastle.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you think about those lovely aspects, if you wanted more of them, what would you want to do?
Well, I suppose that's the difficulty, because to do more sometimes means that we have to change things that are actually already here. And people can't seem to really necessarily agree on how we should do that. And I always feel that rather than sort of thinking about how we can collectively agree on how we'd like it to be, that it's always a bit of a case of, well, this might want that, and this might want that, and let's all run to the opposite ends of the field and throw stones at each other. And I have a dilemma in trying to work out how we can actually make that a little bit different. How can we actually get people to agree on, you know, do other people think that the things I think are nice about the place are the ones that they do? And I don't know the answer to that.
I'm kind of guessing that some point there are always going to be people at opposite ends of the field, and some of them will indeed want to throw stones. But I'm also aware, and it's part of our history, that unlike Sydney, people seem to come together much more. There is much more of a cooperation. And so while there will be that sacrifice, part of your strength is that sense of being able to do things for them.
Oh, and that's where I feel comfortable, even though I may be filling out my clothes a bit, in being relatively small by comparison, because it does mean that even in say sport or the arts or whatever, that we can actually have communities of people who can get to know each other fairly well and build synergies around them. Even recently here in Newcastle, through social media and the internet, we actually have a very strong community of people who have connected through that means who would have found that impossible to do. And even in Sydney, for example, the pockets of those people who form those connections are very disparate and all over the city, where here in Newcastle people have the opportunity to actually come together much easier. So that's certainly an asset that I think we have.
We need to confer, I think, and perhaps provide an element of feedback.
Yeah. I don't think I explained. I'm Newey's general practitioner, and I refer to I hadn't actually worked it out. But I'm sure Newey's pretty exhausted. I've got this terrible sense of voyeurism sitting in on this very personal consultation. But obviously, my patient Newey's got a huge. He's an incredibly complex patient with a lot of dilemmas going on. I've been living with him for 55 years, in fact. And I'm still yet to work him out. So, and that's why I asked him to go along and see you. So, would you like to give me some advice on all the problems and what his strengths and weaknesses are? How, you know, Newey could, how I could work with Newey and continue working with him for whatever it is. Probably another 30 years I might get to be working with him.
I really noticed at the end.
I have some other general practitioners who have also been working with Newey. They've been working with him for some time. They might like to ask some questions later on too.
They really seem to engage with the idea that perhaps there is a sense of community, that he does have more of a dialogue going on than perhaps Sid does.
Yeah, that was certainly my sense, that while there's a lot of worries and concerns about this and that, when we just get those worries aside, there were some lovely aspects he was able to recognise in himself about being able to be inclusive of others. And that seemed to be something that was great value, along with, the beautiful things like the beaches.
I wonder as well if growing up always being, the younger brother has meant that he has this story of himself that he can't say anything positive. It's always a yes part. He's grown up with that story that it's not okay to have his own identity, perhaps because his mother and his uncle haven't necessarily recognised his strengths as the strengths that they are.
I guess I was also thinking about it growing up in a very high achieving family, and so indeed Sydney has achieved a lot, as has Melbourne. But as part of that, growing up in a high achieving family, just not recognising his own achievements in one way. And so I think it might be nice to have a little bit of time in the future, just going back and just really starting to have a look at what he has achieved along the way, and trying to do that in a way where he's not judging himself against the other members. It's really hard to form a family.
I'd like to ask him about the times in his life when perhaps he has had those moments when he's been able to recognise how exceptional he is, how he did deal with the earthquake, for example, how he did deal with the BHP closing, which was a major crisis, and there was so much fear around that, but he certainly perhaps has the opportunity to develop a stronger story of himself as being exceptional.
Of course, I'm a social worker, and so my big thing is that I can't do anything for Neil unless he wants to help himself.
Sort of like a light bulb.
Yeah, those light bulbs.
Exactly. Look, I take I would have liked to explore more about the social strengths and your relationships with others, and you asked about relationships, and you've got, you're actually the big brother of a lot of other places nearby, and they are looking to you, and they will support you in return for some leadership. And I think you could get a lot of, instead of looking south, north, look more west and see what are those relationships that you could develop more in more of a leadership way. I'd like you to become a leader. And of course, I'm shortcutting here, if I was working with you for a long period of time, I'd be saying, let's get a mentor that you're not jealous of, a mentor that you really can work with, who won't be teaching you anything, they'll just be helping you to use your strengths, because there are so many strengths.
That would probably have to be someone from outside the family, I think.
Usually it helps.
Because I have found in the past that, where I've sort of sought that sort of support. Yeah. And being the big brother to other people, it works a little bit. I mean, and I've always tried to include their good things in the work that I do. I was very happy to get the Johns boys down from Cessna to play football, and to grab any of those opportunities. The fact that the Dobell's Gallery was actually out there at Wanji, happy to play in that.
Well, you bought all the paintings, didn't you?
Yes.
Just some assets that you need to build up for tougher times is really positive relationships with people nearby. And they will value you for that, and as I said, they will look to you as a responsible cousin or sibling.
I find though that often when we have meetings and things, people are a bit worried about us calling things Newcastle. And should we call it Newcastle and the Lower Hunter, Newcastle and the something else, because we might offend the other people. And So would it be okay if I just felt good about being Newcastle? And
See, I think this comes back again to worrying about who you are. Be who you want to be, rather than worrying about. It doesn't matter whether they identify Newcastle as the leader or not. They will know you are the leader. Be the leader, and you don't have to get all the praise. Sydney takes all the praise, and you don't like that. You don't want that.
okay.
I think as well it's new is going through a period of change, isn't it? And we often see people that are going through change, and it's a really tough time. I think everyone struggles with that. So you can understand why he's feeling a bit confused or a bit uncertain, and particularly given the childhood that he's had. And often what will happen when people go through a period of change is that they get quite sentimental about how things used to be, because all that they see ahead is the unknown. And at times in the past when there's been change, that's been difficult. And so I probably want to be talking to him about that and getting him to notice that perhaps that's what's going on, that he's getting anxious and worried and more sentimental about how things used to be. I'd probably also like to ask him about what the consequence of not embracing change would be. If things that perhaps stay the way they are, and if we had this conversation in 5 years' time with Newey, how would that be for him?
You'd like to ask me that, and you'd say you just have. I guess one of the reasons that I was speaking to my GP and got this referral really was the sense that I do feel as though it's a point where the risk to remain the same is actually greater than the risk to change. It's almost that sense of the cocoon can only be a butterfly by actually metamorphosing into something else. And I have this sense that, yep, I've had a great life and a great existence and done a lot of really, really good things, but I feel as though I can now actually have the capacity through all of the connections that are there to actually bypass sin, not to worry about that, to actually be able to reach out right around the world to other examples of things and show some of the skills that are based on the things that I've done in the past, but now mean that I can do a whole range of other things. And the fact that I'm a nice place to be means that other people can come and live here who may have other ideas and other ways of doing things and can do it in a more exciting fashion and provide a different sort of future. So I guess that's what I'm seeking is a little bit of bolstering, if you like, to feel that that's an okay thing to do. And it comes back, doesn't it, to that sense of approval all the time.
Once again, really noticing the excitement here about going forward. The moment you start coming in here and now and going forward, there's an awful lot of excitement there. And we really want to explore that further with you and see whether we really want to go with that, while recognising that change is really anxiety provoking. That even if where we're going is better than where we've been, we're just going to be anxious because we haven't been there before and just plain feels uncomfortable. So we wanted to look at developing some skills just to be able to sit with the anxiety and to indeed be able to run with that excitement. It just seems like there's some lovely energy and a lovely sense of, boy, I've done a lot of good things, but it's lift off time here.
Oh, I just get excited about some of the things that I do see happening at the moment. Some of the people who are in the world of marketing and some of those sorts of things that are happening right here at the moment. People sitting at home running businesses that are going worldwide through using different technologies. And some of the things that are happening over at the CSIRO and out at the university. Some stunning examples of people looking at different ways of doing things. And we've got a whole lot of potential in that area. And yeah, I want to feel excited about that and be able to move ahead. But those people may think a little differently than the way that I've always thought in the past. And I need to know that it's okay to embrace those different points of view and for other people to perhaps want things to be a bit different for themselves in terms of their material assets than perhaps the older people and their other family might have had in the past.
I mean, part of the problem here is you're just not going to be able to please everybody. It's just impossible to please. It's always been impossible to please all people all the time. But in terms of when you're going with concerns about, gee, I've left these skills behind, I've left the mind behind, I've left the skills, it was kind of that blank period when we first described that. But really, if you think about it, the amount of excitement in terms of, you know, this is IRO, or university, thinking about health service, research and stuff, there's a lot of exciting stuff that we've started doing. You've actually already morphed to some degree into this new town. You've moved from, I guess, a physical, hard working town. There's still a lot of that here. It hasn't disappeared. But there's a large part that's also morphed into this thinking, researching, tertiary work.
I suppose I often think of the example of the tap dogs, who took the motif of the past and the industry and things and turned it into an art form and did something quite different with it and took it in a different direction. And I'm feeling as though that's where I want to head, to actually certainly keep there's no baby with the bathwater being thrown anywhere here. Keep the things that we are proud about. We've got fabulous heritage in, you know, the built environment, and in terms of our manufacturing and engineering skills, and all of that going back such a long way, that to then build on that and bring in some new ideas that some of our younger people have got, and actually move ahead with that as well, and look at how we can connect with other parts of the world, so that we don't have to necessarily sit in the family hierarchy anymore. It'd be nice to sort of get out the back seat, sit up there in the front, you know, the driver, for a change.
Or drive your own.
Would I be that?
Well, to some degree, I'm hearing that you're already driving.
Oh, well, I do take it for a spin every now and then.
Yeah, that's
So, Doctor, I think one of the things that I'm picking up on is that this conflict arises from an inability to make a decision. And Newey, how do you make decisions? Like, you're expressing where you'd like to go, you're expressing your worries. Chris is challenging you to stay in the present and look forward and not dwell on bad things that have happened in the past. How do you decide to go forward? Do you have good decision-making process?
No, not really, because as soon as I think of a good idea, and I think, all right, well, yep, we'd like to do this, then the little nagging voice starts. And it's, oh, you're only doing that because someone's going to make a lot of money out of it. You know, they'll be rich at doing that. You know, you can't do that. Or oh no, you haven't considered this bit over here. So, and because I suppose of my past and my heritage, I believe that I have to listen to all of those different groups. So I find that it takes me a long time to make a decision about anything, really. And along the way, that everybody seems to get more and more opposed to each other, rather than, we don't ever seem to say, oh yeah, okay, well, I can agree about that bit if you're willing to agree about that bit, and sort it out that way. But I don't seem to really have particularly good skills at doing that.
Okay, Chris, I'm obviously diagnosed correctly. Would you like to recommend some strategies?
I was just thinking, I was just wondering if it's time to dial a friend, really. And so I guess in terms of having all these other GPs, I guess it would be nice to get maybe an idea of what they have to do at this stage. So we've only just mentioned, so we've just got this one view of it. We haven't got the history of it. So I guess at this stage, if it was okay with you, I'd really like to refer back to your GPs and see what they have to say.
Sounds
okay,
good.
segue.
Yeah. Well, I think one of our GPs is over here.
I just do referrals. I'll ask my question to Newey rather than the doctors. It's like so many of us, Newey, your family and the better part, known part of your family have come from overseas. But you haven't told us much about the Indigenous side of your family. You have some really long-term roots here, and I'm wondering if there are some ways that you could build on some of the strengths from that. It seems like you haven't, in expressing only one part of your family heritage, it's like you have, not really expressing the full unity within yourself that might lead to being able to access some strengths that you might not have thought about.
Yeah, I guess the reality is I probably feel a bit embarrassed because it's only been lately that I've started to learn a bit more and remember some of the things that I've done along the way. You know, when I spoke of building that break wall out there and you know, to make it safer for ships and things, one of the other things that was going on at the time was that the air around what we now call knobbies would mean that the ships would lose headway, and so they thought the best way to deal with that was to cut the top bit of it off. And nobody bothered to ask the local Aboriginal people about their dreaming stories of what that particular bit of rock represented to them. It just went ahead and cut it off. So I guess things like that have made me feel a little bit embarrassed and self-conscious about that particular relationship. And it's only been, as I say, lately that we're starting to learn more and more about that. And I'm interested, for example, in you know, the Warramai people. When if we stood up where the hill is now and looked up the beach and think of all of that land and the land use and the way of dealing with all of these muddy low-lying islands out here that have now been partially reclaimed and changed, and what's the impact been on traditional practice and lifestyle. And I suppose there's a little sense of embarrassment in the fact that we've been so ignorant in the past, and that it's not necessarily been possible due to some of the things that, you know, I brought with me when I was first formed in terms of disease and attitudes and those sorts of things that meant that the people who did live here very quickly became disconnected with their sense of environment. And it's only recently that we've started to recognise the value of culture and understanding and try to actually work that within our practices. But I think certainly to come back to the assets of where I am physically, part of that recognition of the value of our environment generally taps back into that heritage of a culture who lived you know, in reasonable partnership, if you like, in a spirit of reciprocity with both themselves and their environment for 40, 50, 60,000 years or whatever. And we do have that heritage to call on, and that recognition that particularly the sense of reciprocity is such an important aspect of how we build and structure our community going forward, how the sense of mutual obligation works, and how we can actually assign roles for each other that mean that all of us are recognised as having an important part to play in our community. So I probably haven't answered the question particularly well, but I'm trying to sort of say that there's been a period of disconnect, and I'm fairly glad that at the moment we're really looking at how we tap that traditional culture in a contemporary society and how we can actually use the lessons learned from that to inform the way that we do business in the future.
You're not Dave, and I just wondered if you hadn't thought about that mental arrangement that you were talking about beforehand. I think you've got one that you should be looking at, and I think it's here. On the other side of the continent, there's a young lass called Cleo Trio, and she's done some nice things over the last while. She certainly suffered the Newey complex that you have, and she seems to have come through quite well. She's got a lovely heart, and she has arteries that seem to be quite clear now, and she manages you know, the kind of thing that Huddersfield is currently. And she's a lovely place to walk around in, and to travel to by train, dare I say. And I wondered if maybe you couldn't perhaps talk to her. She's a good peer for you to have, and to see the kind of things that she's done, how she's done them, and how she's been able to change and change like in modern times and have a modern life, but retain, you know, the lovely heritage that she has, and you certainly have. You know, a walk around here is, you know, in the heritage parts, it's just beautiful, and it's so neglected and so underrated by the people that live here, and of course nobody comes here because the M3 goes past us, and nobody's sort of told them that the London plan is actually right. So I think, you know, maybe if you could get in touch with Frida, she's a good girl. She's got an older brother complex as well, but she's managed to overcome that, and she has a life of her own, and she's got some good mates. You know, Quinana's just down the road, and Quinana's a bit grubby, of course, and smokes too much. But down further, she's got a younger sister called Margaret. You might know she's married to a local river, so she's Margaret River now. And you know, all down that way, she's got some good friends. Like you have here too. You know, like Princess Knock and the other place she mentioned, like Maitland and stuff. Maitland was a lovely girl as well, and she's got a lovely heritage that's overlooked. So you've got a fair bit in common here. So I just like to suggest that maybe get in touch with Rihanna and have a yarn with her, and see what you can do about that, and maybe raise your self-esteem a bit. Certainly, she's over there at Korea. She's got a beautiful thing called Little Creatures, and Red England. You know, that's a really good guru.
Well, thank you for that. I think the sense of engaging virtually, I've done a bit of that with Matilda Bay, as you say, Little Creatures and things, but I haven't actually been to visit Freo, but I would certainly look forward to the chance. So I guess that's, as I've got older, that opportunity to actually look beyond who and what I see myself as, I think is really going to be important for me, and not just in Australia, but in other cities. And I know that there are some people, for example, you know, looking at different ways of getting people around the city in terms of cycleways and hubs and integrated transport options and things that can be borrowed from all sorts of places around the world. I went to visit another girl in America recently called San Diego, and she actually has 3 rail lines between her and the harbour, and people seem to get along quite comfortably.
Could I say Northern's is the same?
Yeah. So there are certainly, I think, examples, and I suppose part of that is me perhaps getting to the stage where I am comfortable enough to say, well, look, maybe I'm not going to be worried so much about what used to be and try to be what I used to be, but think about what I could be. And based on what I've got and what we could have, and try to be a little bit more optimistic about that, and certainly borrow some examples. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, do we?
William Brogoff, and I'm a psychologist, and it's been fantastic to watch these 3 counsellors take on such a difficult client and I've actually had the privilege of sitting back and being able to do a bit of an assessment and a formulation of my own from the comfort of here. And as a number of people said, people come to see us because of inner conflict, confusion, and in order to grow, they need to really accept the need for change, and sometimes for a radical change, for real paradigm shifts. And it means taking responsibility for their own contribution often to the mess that's been created. And often, of course, that means moving towards greater honesty and a sense of integrity. And it takes time often for the most important issues to arise. Often you can see somebody for quite some time before they kind of get to a sense of, well, actually this is something that I have never wanted to address, but it's here. So I guess as a part of that, I wondered what has happened to the greatest moral challenge of our generation, and Newey's contribution to that. And it seems to me that it's a part of this whole notion of cognitive dissonance, and that the idea that one of our great defence mechanisms is denial. And we've just had a new mayor elected under a landslide, and he's a climate denier, which it seemed to make me think that Newey actually isn't ready to face up to one of the biggest issues that it's actually complicit with. And so I wonder, will Newey's dysfunction and confusion actually ever be resolved until it ends the rather difficult and destructive relationship with the coal industries? We were talking about relationships before, and that potential misery that will get passed on onto our children, as it does through the generations when we don't deal with our own dysfunction and the things that we're unwilling to look at because it's kind of comfortable and it gives us money in our pockets. And so I wonder, both perhaps to Newey and to the psychologist, whether you think that might actually be a big issue here. It's
a little bit back when I used to smoke, and someone once said to me, how can an intelligent person like you continue to do something that all the research proves is bad for you? And yet for quite some time I kept doing that. And I suppose right throughout my history as a city, from the very first foundations, coal has been a part of that equation, and manufacturing and acceptance of the despoilation, if you like, that goes with, as a byproduct of manufacturing industry, as a necessary consequence of providing work and opportunity for a lot of people. And that's the dilemma I find myself in the moment, that I live in a space which is beautiful and where we're so grateful for the fact that the air quality is clean, and yet, as I said, there are other issues starting to emerge. But I then look around the suburb and see lots and lots of Hilux trucks with big flexi aerials that travel up the valley to work in the open cuts every day, and without that job opportunity, I know that those people would be looking for something else to do. And so I have this sense that on the one hand I know what should happen, on the other hand I'm sort of still dealing, and I probably haven't got to the stage yet where I'm willing to sort of say, well, we are not going to take the decision that this will be a clean energy engagement, that we will actually phase that out and get rid of that because it's not doing any of us any good. But knowing that I would then have a huge difficulty in dealing with the employment issue around that and the flow-on effect in other industries that feed that. So I'm still in that dilemma, as I suspect lots of people who work with me are, in terms of how we look at that. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and it's almost as though, don't look over there, because there are a lot of big holes in the ground, and particularly if we fly over them.
Can I make an observation, not as a psychologist? I think we reached the point before where Newey has agreed that it would be good to set some goals for the future. But I think the other thing that Newey would benefit from is making a decision about what his values are. Now, we haven't had a chance. I would, in a longer consultation, I would have said what's really important. And when you've got your values, your goals agreed tell you where you want to go. Your values tell you how you're going to get there, because you will rule in or rule out various options that you have in front of you. With unclear goals, you could end up anywhere. With unclear values, you could end up ashamed or regretful. And there are issues that need to be dealt with going forward.
I'm one of the GPs as well, who has looked after you for some time, and I want to cut through the mumbo jumbo that psychologists and social workers often go on with, and I just want to treat you. So I want to write out a script for you. I want you to tell me what you think that would be on that script, that one thing, that one solution that would be on that script to get you to move forward, so that we can just get on and solve this problem. Treat you.
This is a get on with the job pill, isn't it?
That's what I do.
I suppose something that would allow me to be very clear about just asserting what it is that I think is important, and giving the strength and ability to actually get people on board with that idea. I don't know whether there's a pill for that.
It has to be.
Yeah, because I guess it comes back to and the values. I think pride in who and what I am, and the sense that people want to identify with that, is probably one of the first and most critical elements. And we see it through really weird things. We see it when the Knights win a grand final.
Soon, hopefully.
Well, but the identification with champions, people who do good things and that we can actually feel as though we have a sense of ownership with. And I guess it's finding more and more opportunities to actually make those things very visible and to stand out and to make them things which we can all be proud of and feel championed by, because they're not at the expense of other things in that competitive sense. So it's not a sense of one thing winning because of the ability to crawl over others to allow that to happen. that we actually have champions who do things that are good and that actually bring people on board with a sense of shared achievement and purpose. So I guess that certain, which is still building on that sense of community, I think would be a really important thing. But I don't know that there's a good thing.
Our therapist, would you like to give any final advice to our clients?
Sure, I want to give final advice at this point. I certainly don't have a clear bill. But I guess what I was thinking, just thinking around William's questions about the coal, and just thinking in terms of behaviour change, and that's what we're talking about. But if we want to change from one behaviour to another, we almost need to, before we get rid of the behaviour, to slip some other behaviours in underneath. So if we think about BHP, the process of changing away from being a steel city, there was an awful lot of effort put into retraining the workforce there so that there were kind of other behaviours. With giving up smoking, what we're looking at is a whole set of replacement behaviours. And so in terms of going forward, I very much agree in terms of we need to work out what our values are because they're going to help establish the goals. But in terms of moving towards those goals, if they're moving away from particular behaviours, we need to be starting to get some skills and other behaviours in place to slide in underneath. And that takes time.
Okay.
I think just possibly to sum up, it seems to me that your confusion and lack of direction probably stems from that history of feeling second rate. But I think our conversation today showed that you do have a story of yourself as strong, and there's been times in your history where you've been able to be independent, where perhaps you've moved away from the dominant story of being, the dirty second-rate younger brother. I think as William said, as therapy goes on and perhaps you are in a safer place where you can start to see another story of yourself as Chris was talking about, then, and perhaps even at the same time it's an opportunity to address those other parts of you that you would like to be different, the things that you would like to change about yourself, and exploring in more detail the consequence of not making those changes, which, as William was saying, are quite serious consequences. We wish you all the best and we hope to see you back on the couch.
Thank you. And the invoice will be in front.
This has just been so funny. It's just extraordinarily good. And I feel so privileged to have been here, and I'm delighted that we filmed it because that was just so well done. But I can't say anything. That's fantastic. So just as I said early on, just to remind you, next month, Carol McMillan, the Vice-Chancellor about the University of Newcastle, and in November, Ross Gittins. But really, I mean, the stars of the night, Trevor, Chris, Tanya and Roger, Yuri, and